You know that feeling when you finally decide to buy something, and the moment you hit the button, the price drops? Like you buy a brand new laptop for $1,500 and literally the next morning it's 20% off. Well, imagine that feeling. But with Bitcoin, you bought at 95,000 or 92,000 or maybe even 104,000 at the top in late 2024. You believed in the ETFs. You believed institutions were finally here. You did your research. You watched all the bullish videos, and now Bitcoin is just stuck. It pops to 98,000, drops back to 88,000, then crawls to 93. And you're sitting there thinking, wait, why isn't this thing at 150,000 already? Didn't the ETFs change everything? Why does the price feel heavy? My name is Finn, and today I'm going to explain something most people have no clue about: why Bitcoin's price might be artificially suppressed right now, completely legally, using a loophole that banks and institutions have used for decades to force assets into distress and accumulate them at huge discounts. And before we go further, you need to understand this. If you don't know how this mechanism works, you will be outsold, outplayed, and outmaneuvered every single cycle. This is not conspiracy, this is not a theory, this is financial engineering. And once you understand it, you'll never look at Bitcoin's price the same way again. So hit that like button, subscribe, and let's break down the playbook big money uses to manipulate markets without breaking a single law. Let's start with the big question. If Bitcoin adoption is skyrocketing, why isn't the price skyrocketing too? We have Bitcoin ETFs, pension funds buying, Wall Street on board, supply on exchanges at historical lows, the halving behind us, everything screams bull market. And yet the chart looks like it's dragging an anchor. Why? Because institutions don't buy like retail. Retail buys FOMO. Institutions buy discounts. Retail says, wow, ETFs, let's buy. Banks say, how do we push this price down so we can buy cheaper and accumulate billions without causing a pump? And there is a way, a legal way, a documented way, a historically proven way, a mechanism so old it predates the internet. And it all starts with debt. To explain this, I need to tell you a story that sounds unrelated, but it's the foundation of everything. In the early 1980s, countries like Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil borrowed billions from international banks in US dollars, not pesos, not reals, dollars. This matters because they couldn't print dollars. So when the US Federal Reserve raised interest rates, their debt payments exploded. Suddenly, these countries were trapped. They owed money in a currency they couldn't control. And when they couldn't pay, they became forced sellers. They had to sell state companies, resources, infrastructure, anything demanded by lenders, just to keep the system running. This was called a debt spiral, and it worked beautifully for the lenders. They acquired assets at huge discounts from countries under pressure without technically forcing anything because everything was legal. Now imagine this same dynamic applies to companies, and right now, one of the largest Bitcoin holders on Earth sits in a structure that, if pressured, could trigger a similar spiral. A spiral that forces them to sell Bitcoin at exactly the wrong moment and at massive discounts to the same institutions applying the pressure. Let's bring this closer to home. Imagine you own a house worth $500,000. You borrow $100,000 at a variable interest rate. Rates are low. Life is good, then rates shoot up. Your payment doubles, and suddenly you're in trouble. You have three options: sell the house, borrow more, or default. No crime was committed. It's just economics. But the psychological pressure? That's the real weapon. Once stress begins, you make panic decisions that benefit the bank, not you. Now scale this up. Imagine a company holding billions in Bitcoin. They issue debt. They rely on their stock price. They depend on market confidence. And a downturn could turn them into a forced seller, whether they like it or not. This fictional example represents a real structural risk. A large Bitcoin holder with leverage is always vulnerable. Institutions know exactly who holds debt, when payments are due, how much cash is left, and when pressure could force a liquidation. And Bitcoin is the perfect target because institutions want exposure, but they don't want to pay full price. And here's what makes this even more fascinating. Institutions also know how retail investors behave. They know retail hates red candles. They know retail panics when prices drop quickly. They know retail watches emotions, not liquidity structures. They know retail sells bottoms and buys tops. So when an institution pushes pressure onto a leveraged Bitcoin holder, they get a second bonus effect. Retail panic sells at the same time. This creates a double dip effect. The distressed seller is pushed to liquidate, and the average investor starts selling too because they assume something is wrong. Meanwhile, the institution sits back and quietly accumulates everything retail throws away. Let me give you a simple analogy. Imagine you want to buy every house on your street, but you don't want anyone noticing because that would push prices up. So instead, you start talking loudly about a possible burglary, or a factory closing nearby, or a zoning change. Nothing illegal, just pressure, just fear. Suddenly, homeowners get nervous. They list their homes. Prices drop. You start buying. This is how accumulation works in every market. Create fear, create pressure, buy cheap, then watch prices rise again. Stay with me here, because what I'm about to show you next is where it all clicks. Now let's return to Bitcoin. Here's the part nobody talks about. Institutions don't just want Bitcoin, they want discounted Bitcoin. They know the only way to buy billions worth without triggering a massive pump is through block trades. Block trades only happen when someone is distressed, in debt, low on cash, or pushed into a corner. If institutions can push a major holder into distress, they gain access to $5 billion, $10 billion, even $20 billion worth of Bitcoin at 10 to 20% below market price. Retail will never get that opportunity. Banks will. And here's the simple play. They don't have to attack Bitcoin directly. They attack the weakest link in the ecosystem. They short the stock of any large leveraged Bitcoin holder. They apply pressure. They wait. If distress happens, a forced sale happens. And forced sales are where institutions get the cheapest Bitcoin they will ever see. And while all this is happening, what does retail see? A red chart, fear, confusion, pain, rumors, doubt. Retail does not see debt structures, block trade negotiations, liquidity pressures, institutional incentives, or forced seller timelines. Retail only sees price, and that's why retail always loses. Here's the truth. Institutions do not care about your emotions. They care about your Bitcoin. And now let's answer the real question. Should you panic? No, absolutely not. Here's why. This isn't bearish, it's bullish. You don't manipulate the price of something you don't want. If institutions didn't want Bitcoin, they'd ignore it. The fact they want it cheaper means they want it. Bitcoin's fundamentals haven't changed. Scarcity is intact. Decentralization is intact. Network effects are intact. Adoption is rising. This is short-term noise. Pressure creates opportunity. If you understand the mechanics instead of reacting emotionally, you win. Retail panics. Institutions accumulate. Don't be retail. The countdown matters. Every leveraged entity has a timeline. Eventually, debt gets refinanced, cash positions recover, shorts unwind, pressure fades, and Bitcoin does what it always does: break free, run hard, and melt faces. And when that moment comes, it happens quickly. The same institutions that suppress the price will tell their clients Bitcoin is a strong long-term buy. The same analysts who spread fear will announce new targets. The same banks warning about volatility will offer Bitcoin products. And retail will look around and say, wait, what just happened? What happened is the same thing that has happened in every market throughout modern financial history. Pressure, accumulation, expansion, profit. Look, I'm not telling you Bitcoin goes to 150,000 tomorrow. I'm not saying banks are criminals. I'm saying something more important. Big money plays a different game than you. They use leverage, pressure, psychological traps, and completely legal loopholes to push markets wherever they want them. Not because Bitcoin is weak, but because Bitcoin is valuable. And the more valuable something is, the more aggressively institutions fight over it. So if you own Bitcoin right now, Don't get shaken out by short-term noise designed to scare inexperienced investors. Know what you own, know why you own it, and understand the game being played around you. The game isn't rigged against you, you just didn't know the rules. Now you do. If this video helped you see the bigger picture, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with someone stressing about the price. Stay smart, stay patient, and I'll see you in the next video.